Happy Saturday to y'all. We're live from the CFI class in Miami in Opa-locka Airport, where we're based out of here at OPF, Oscar Papa Foxtrot, beautiful airport. We're at the Signature FBO, and we have a classroom upstairs, a conference room that we use for that. We have people in a Palo Alto classroom right now. Let me stop the share here, who are, you can share your screen if you want to, who are also zooming in, and they have a big monitor in the classroom, and we have people online, so that's what's happening here. I'm going to introduce our speaker today. It's not going to be me, haha. And for those of you who are used to the format of the show, it's going to be slightly different. We're going to let him go on to about 5 minutes before the hour. I'll release the new product at 5 minutes before the hour for the half off. And then we'll keep the room open so you can talk, and we'll have it moderated there a little bit. And then I have to go off to a breakout room. I put all of our people from CFI Bootcamp in a breakout room so we can continue working because we got stuff to do. But I'll chime in when I can. Okay, I know a lot of you have a lot of things you like to say, and that's a nice space to be able to spend time. And if I don't see Mitchell in here, I'm going to have a heart attack. So I'll look for you later. All right. So anyway, let me get rolling with this. Let's see what else I've got to do. So the format and the Wings credit will be in the chat. The only way you can get it is by clicking on the link that's in the chat. Anything that comes up that's important, we're going to put in the chat. So keep an eye on it as the show goes, and that'll do it. All right. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Fernando. He's going to talk today about something scary. So let's have him introduce himself and go ahead and say what you need to say, and I'll go off camera and off mic.
There we go.
There you go. Nice. Mm-hmm.
All right. Check, check, 1, 2. Hey guys, or everybody, I should say, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to be here. My name is Fernando Molina. So let me pop on here and kind of show the screen here. Yeah, here to talk about a little excursion I had last year with a good friend of mine, Joe Creasy. And we'll kind of go through the hows and whys why we're there. I'm CFI and double I here in the Vegas area, Fast Team member and a Wings Pro member. And then since 2019, I think, or 2018, I started supporting a young man named Jason Miller, who has a channel called Learn the Finer Points. And then I'll talk about the camps that he puts on and how we ended up where we ended up. And then as a final note, new logo on my shirt today, starting this week and going next week for training. I'm actually going to go out and I'll be the All-in Aviation Husky sales rep here in Vegas. So if anybody's looking for a Husky, let me know. Hopefully I'll be able to have a demo up around here next week. And then we'll be off the races on that part. So it's kind of all who I am. All right, let's get started. Unless Mike or Nick, anything else as far as past the intro here, or just get going?
You're in good shape, Fernando.
Awesome. I'll just take that as a get going. So fun thing about the title, Jason actually, as a result of doing this on the way from our Canyon Flying Camp from last year, we just did this year's last weekend, all over the Monument Valley area of Utah and all around Utah. And we were coming back from that. So we had this off-airport landing on a mesa, and I'll show it to you here in a minute. And then for this year's Oshkosh, he actually arranged for me to give this as a safety talk. So basically what I'm doing is giving you guys effectively the talk that I had there. I told him this is kind of half a joke. I took odds as a joke with the title, but it's good and dramatic, and it got, almost 100 people to come out and watch the talk live at Oshkosh. But as you can see, the airplane's there, and it's a successful airport landing, in my opinion. And here we go. All right. This is what I did in my previous life. I was Strike Eagle backseater. This is me over. It looks pretty there. You might think it's the mountains here in the US, but that's actually Afghanistan. So it's not really that pretty. But it's a good picture. So just so you guys can prove that I actually flew in this airplane at one point in time or another, about 2,500 hours flying that sucker. She was a hoot. And then just so you can tell, the last picture wasn't AI, it was a little close up. All right. So Learn the Finer Points and adventure camps. LearnTheFinerPoints.com is his website. This isn't to necessarily promote his website, but it's a reason why I do a lot of the fun and flying and instruction that I get to do. So you can see there's four of them throughout the year this year. Baja's coming up in a couple of weekends. But just last weekend, we went to Canyons of the Southwest, which again is through Monument Valley, Utah, and through there. And just to give you a reference, this is what it looks like. This is the airplane camp. Monument Valley UT-25 is an awesome airport. You can see here pretty clearly there's an incline grade to the runway. There is a mesa behind where this picture is being taken, and there's a mesa to the left of where this picture is being taken. So it's pretty much a kind of a one way in, one way out, or you really have to make a go around decision really early. This year I got to make a couple. How about that? That's the protagonist, my buddy Joe Creasy, very experienced, like 1,000 hour plus 182 pilot, and we were flying a rental 182 from Vegas for the purposes of this camp. This is an example. So it's beautiful out there. It's great to go out there and enjoy general aviation flying and see the sights of areas like this. But part of the reason for the camp is, what do you do if you're in an area like this and something starts to go wrong? We all learn emergency procedures during our training, and some of us practice them more than others. And I'll get to that for myself in a minute. But what we do, that's part of the topic that we give during the camp for this adventure flying course, if you will, as well as the mountain camps, is we talk about the risks involved in doing mountain and canyon flying. We talk about what to do if something goes wrong, and how to plan for that, and then hopefully how to train for it. And then things like how to minimize your energy for an off-airport landing somewhere not fun to land at, like you're looking at right now, as well as what are your after-action items and thoughts. And then finally, how do you get found and stay found if for some reason you end up in a place like this and you might have to be there for 24 to 48 or 72 hours or more. All right, more beautiful scenery. Again, enjoy it with general aviation. However, yeah, we got to take it for granted and assess and mitigate risks as we do with our risk management strategies. Here's some flying that we do. So you can see an example here is when the pilots that are paired up with CFIs decide they want to do a little bit of extra skill building that they don't normally do. Stuff like making sure that we brief a good safe formation plan, and then we go out there and go do this. As an example of the adventure type skills that we do during the camps. This is me and Joe Creasy at an airport called Height Airfield. This is on the northern tip of Lake Powell in the canyon. So you have canyons on your base leg, your crosswind leg, and on your downwind leg that you have to account for and then land. And then this runway is 40 foot wide and it's got a dog leg at the end. So these are all just great flying skills that you get to go there. There's a happy Joe for making his landing. So that's kind of the skills we're doing. And we've been flying all weekend long. Here's another fun little flight through hey, think we can go through there? And I'm like, well, let's do your risk assessment. You think you can? Because if you make the wrong decision, it could go really bad really quick. And so we're basically learning and making decisions all weekend long. And this is one example. But when you do that, you learn to, again, assess your risk constantly. When you have extra terrain than the normal GA flying, and you're lower to the ground, so your risk level is a little bit elevated, but you get to talk about it. And we get to go through all of that in a flying camp. This is an example of kind of how we run around southern Utah up to Canyonlands from UT-25 Monument Valley. So just an example, and you can see that there's my track log for the second half of the day of doing the round robin and checking out a lot of beautiful sites in Utah. We actually get a flying archaeologist on Friday night before Saturday's flying, which is the round robin around Utah. And he describes all of the really cool, unique features that are out there. Like you can see annotated, let me see, I think my mouse should be shown here, right? So a crater upheaval dome is a prehistoric meteor that landed out there, and it's just beautiful to go out there and check it out. And you got some other sites right there. UT-97, that was Hite Airfield that you just saw the video for. So that's just an example. And this isn't, again, promoting the camp, but more so letting everybody know this is the kind of experience that me and Joe had been there for the whole weekend. Me supervising him as a CFI, even though he's a good, experienced pilot. But basically, we've been doing all this flying about close to 15 hours over the weekend, and we go. So make sure and chime in if you need to. Nick, if you do me a favor and help out. I don't remember if Nick or Mike is hanging out. But if anybody's got a question as we're going, then feel free to let me know. I think we're going to handle some at the end. But anyway, camp's over. Let's go home. I'm at Henderson Airport. And so we were going to do a nice simple mission, about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours flying home. You can see on the north side of the Grand Canyon itself, that's the SFRA that's outlined in blue. Yeah, a fairly simple type of a plan. 8.5 was going to cover us for altitude on the way home. Let's see, this right here is Page, Arizona, for anybody's reference. Actually, you're not seeing that here. So Page, Arizona is the airport just south of Lake Powell. Sorry about that. I'm playing with my mouse on my MacBook and I'm thinking you guys can see it, but I'm realizing I don't think you guys are seeing that right now. But anyway, that's what underneath the Lake Powell, that's Page, Arizona, PGA. So that's the plan, but that's not what happened. And that's why we're here. Oh, go back. Let me show you guys a fun track log I have. There she is. My last flight of 2024. And here you go. No, that's not it. Sorry. 29. Oh, wrong one. I apologize. That's it. All right. Here we go. So here you go. UT-25, like I showed you, and there's the incline. Let's start flying. I'll go to 10 times so that we can go take off. We're going to start flying to about 10,500, or I'm sorry, 8,500 is our initial altitude going westbound. And yeah, you can see there's the first mesa to clear. You're going through. Your terrain is off and on about being decent for you. And as we're climbing up, we're getting close to level off at about 8.5. Before anybody notices, I'll show that, remember the GPS altitude that you're seeing in the upper left corner sometimes is at odds a little bit with the MSL for a bunch of reasons, but we won't get into those now if you haven't encountered that. So we get up to 8.5. And as we're going up, we start to get, we have a JPI engine monitor, and we start to get engine oil pressure fluctuations. And we're like, huh. And we're getting up here and we're getting close to probably leveled off about now. I'm going to pause. And we look at each other and I'm like, you see that? And it kind of fluctuates, goes back to normal. And it did it a couple times on the climb. So when we level off, we're kind of watching for a bit and it kind of stayed about the way it was. And back in my military flying days, I always had a saying that, like, if you are thinking something and the other person says it, that's like a confirmation, right? So Joe looks at me and I look at him. I was like, you see that? And he's like, yep. And I'm going, all right, well, let's keep an eye on it. And we started troubleshooting a little bit airborne. We assessed basically like it's a digital engine monitor. It's going back to normal indications. It had done it once or twice over the course of the weekend. And so we kind of were like, all right, it could be a hiccup of the sensor. As a huge irony, the airplane was going to go into an annual the next day after we got her home. So we're going, all right, well, we'll monitor this. If the oil pressure is at truly low or there's an issue there, it should be heating up as well. So we were looking for an increased temperature. That wasn't happening. So we're like, we're going to continue. And so we go here and then we go for a little bit. And Joe looks at me and he's like, you want to climb to 10.5? And I'm like, good idea. I'm like, it was awesome because we were both, doing our assessments and continually running through this, our brain. And so we start climbing. So let me keep going here. So we're climbing. You can kind of see the train we're flying over again. And while we're doing this, I'll point out Jason Miller learned the finer points, right? He has a technique and he calls it swinging from a vine. I know he's not the only one who has a good technique, just pointing it out because, I've been working with him for a while, working on his ground school app and content, and then, of course, these camps. And we talk about this as a lesson in the camps. As it turns out, I'm not doing that right now. We're a little focused on the engine. And I'm actually trying to get flight following with Denver Center, Tuba City 127.55. It's kind of ingrained in my brain now. So we go for the climb, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. But you can, in hindsight, be able to see everything we were flying over and maybe start to think what I was thinking to myself in debrief for sure of, all right, no big deal. There's a whole bunch of places out there that are good precautionary landing spots. That's a hindsight thought because we're just flying and we're continuing to troubleshoot a little bit. We were actually, frankly, getting a little perturbed with Denver Center for not answering us on to request flight following. And then we get to the top of climb, right about here. Everything from here is in downhill. So just as a quick pause, it turns out our decision to go to 10.5 is a pretty good one because I got to debrief with the controller, and the controller told us we were hearing your transmissions, but you were down in the southwest corner of the whole sector. And Page, Arizona is very close to actually the changeover point. If you pull up an IFR chart, you can see the changeover point. It's just a little bit past Page. So we were literally in the corner of his sector in the southern and western, because down south is oh, what's the sector down there? I think that might also be LA Center, but bottom line is we're at literally the corner of two changeover ports for center. But when we got to 10.5, they could hear us. He said we had heard you choppy, like every other word type stuff, or maybe a half a transmission, but we didn't have enough information to go ahead and respond to you. When we got to 10.5, the airplane started sputtering, and it sputtered, and it went down to zero airway pressure, and then it started going to 1200 to 1500 RPM and wouldn't go above that from this point forward. So we're like, uh-oh, well, what's happening now? And Joe, smart, good pilot, and he just immediately is like, what's the checklist? What's my best glide? And I pull it up, and I'm like, checklist, best glide 77. And from that point forward, for the next about 6 minutes, Joe is nailing 77. He's monitoring the engine. He's monitoring stuff. I saw him trying to mess with the mixture and trying to mess with some of the settings to see if the engine would do anything. And so he's flying the airplanes, and I'm like, a lot of CFIs will sit there and go, hey, in an emergency, we're going to take over. As an example, I had a recent private pilot on my Canyon trip this trip last weekend, and we had a pre-brief that if there was an emergency, I'd let him fly for a bit, but I'd probably take over, especially for any kind of off-airport landing situation. In this case, Joe's doing a great job. And so I let him fly, and then I did what I thought was a really important task right now, which is hopped on the radio and I started doing coordination. And you heard me say Denver Center, November 3444 Romeo, emergency. We had a power loss. And I was able to pull my port flight out. I had a couple brain bites and go ahead and measure. We're approximately 25 miles east of Page. So the awesome part at this moment is they come right on the radio with an immediate response, and we're off to the races. So that was like super, super refreshing given the frustration. I actually had low hopes that they were going to catch us, but they hopped on right away and we started to do that coordination. A couple radio calls back and forth, souls on board, how much gas do you have? I actually put all that information out in the initial radio call. Shows you, you have extra brain bites. You can put a complete radio call out and not screw it up. Like compared to, I know when I'm flying, I make plenty of radio call mistakes. So I put it all out there, but it's also a good lesson that sometimes you can put too much information out to air traffic control, right? They're managing a bunch of airplanes. And if you cold call them with everything under the sun as far as who you are, what your plans are, what's going, they're likely to give you a response of like, okay, I got your call sign. Here's a um, here's a IFF for you. I'm sorry, I'm a 3 for you. And then what are your intentions? And so you're going to go through the conversation anyway. So just a little debrief note I probably could have done the cold call with an emergency my tail number, altitude, and location, and then waited and let them respond and go from there. As it turns out, we did about 2 or 3 radio calls and got to the end of it. And he's like, "What are your intentions?" And I just get done saying, "We're going to try to make Page." And again, we're about 25 miles away. We have partial power. And as soon as I did that, Joe looks at me and then he jumps on the mic. We were kind of splitting those duties at that point, and he says, "We're not going to Page." Um, and that hit me like a smack in the face because truly, and I've heard about this. If you listen to the AOPA or AOPA There I Was series, I can think through a number of those emergencies that were on that what I consider a super valuable series there, where people were like, "I really thought I could make the runway. I really thought I was going to be able to make it somewhere." And I can relate to that. We both, I think, had a hope and a feeling that we're going to try to make as far as we can and hopefully make it to Page with this partial power. And it's very insidious because you're going to figure out that you can try to make where you want to make, but the airplane's going to have a vote, and then it's going to tell you what your performance is. So anyway, that's a whole bunch on like some analysis going on in our brains. But Joe just putting that out over the radio to everybody was like crap. And here we go. So we're on the way down. We're on about a 500 foot per minute descent, and this is what we're looking at. So let me aim it for you a little bit. And right around here, we're like looking around, and I'm going to go this way so that you can see that basically we're looking out the windscreen, and that's what we're seeing. Again, you might think, well, hey, look at that. That's cool. Nice and convenient. Well, when you're in the moment, I can tell you that, that habit pattern of what's out 30 degrees left and right of your windscreen, that's what we did. It's not swinging from a vine. And in hindsight, had we been looking for diverts continuously, especially at the moment of getting some weird oil indications, and looking at divert options and off-airport possible options, hanging on to one that even is behind you would have been absolutely super valuable. But as it turns out, we're doing what I would say average GA pilots do, is we're just flying along. And then at the moment we had to make the decision, we're not going to make Page. We looked out in front of us and we made a decision and picked some. And it ended up being a Mesa that we'll watch and fly to. And so everything that's behind us, that's hindsight. And it is what it is at this point. And from now on, what we're doing is we're assessing all the pieces of the Swiss cheese model and risk and going, am I going to be able to make the intended point of landing that we picked, which was this Mesa right here. And there's our landing. Now, if I back up just slightly, one of the great things about making the decision to let him fly was here we are, and we're looking at the end of the Mesa, and we're going, I hope you can make it, I hope we can make it. Well, it turns out we actually had excess energy. We're flying 77, the stall speed of the 182 is obviously below that. We had a prop that was turning. One of the conditions you can do to minimize your energy is to feather the prop or take it to lowest pitch possible. I'm sorry, highest pitch possible to minimize your drag. We didn't have oil, so if we would have tried that, it would have been great. But it turns out like we didn't try it. We were just trying to make that Mesa, and I promise you, we were taking that motor and running it for as best, whatever we could. Other actions, what about pre-landing checklist? Well, we were just trying to make the Mesa. So when landing was assured, Joe put the flaps in, and then we got ready to land. Oh, what about a forced landing checklist? Nope, didn't think about it. It's important. And in my mind, super important, because shutting off the fuel is really important for forced landing, especially to minimize the chance of a fire after you get there. But we didn't do that either. So we just landed, and we were happy that we landed because the area around this Mesa was very inhospitable. Lastly, crew coordination wise, we're going here. And if you look, there's a little cut in the edge of the Mesa on the left-hand side. And when we're getting ready to land, we're actually aiming a little bit towards that edge. And it made me really nervous. So I yelled at him. I was like, go to the right, go to the right, go to the right, because he's kind of pointing towards it. Let me go to back to 1 so you can kind of see it at spade. So he puts in some right aileron and a boat loader, right rudder, and you're going to see the airplane jaunt to the right, which is great, away from that edge. And I'm pretty happy because it's kind of on the left of the wingtip on this track log, like it's a sloping to a steep drop off on that left side. So that's what's there. You'll get to see it here in a minute, and then the stop. So we do a stop. We look at each other. We're like, "You okay? Yeah, you okay? Huh? Uh, I should shut off the fuel." And so we shut off the fuel, and then we start doing some actions on the ground. So that's our flight. I'll stop that there, and then let me show you all. Oops, sorry. Back to keynote. That's what I wanted to do. This is Molina Mesa. There she is. Nice little mesa. Big rock wall formation that was in front of us. And so, yeah. Nice little landing spot. Got to take our video and then start doing a couple of actions. Um, there's the airplane. You can see it's intact. Like I don't even think there was a prop strike. Of course, we don't have the airplane in our possession at the moment. But there I am digging through for my stuff. And it turns out Joe had to dig through for his stuff. Here's a good note on dress to egress. So what we did was we get there. You can see it's kind of a hard pack-ish dirt. Not totally hard pack. It gets a little soft at times. And then you can see the little rock croppings that are embedded into that dirt. So it's all in there. And that's kind of what we landed on. So it's kind of a little bit of a Mr. Toad's wild ride. We ended up touching down about 500 feet into the mesa. We had plenty of time to measure this off, by the way. And then it looked like around a 900-foot landing roll for what also appeared to be around a 3,000-foot long mesa. So thankfully we had that out there. And then I'll show you a little bit more about the terrain that's out there. That's damage to the right strut. You can see it's pretty much just the fairing. It's because we hit a tree, a little kind of a, I don't know, tactical bush, I'll call it, out there in the desert. Pretty dry, so it kind of keeled over, but that was damage. We had a flat tire, and it looks like the strut compressed. There's a little bit of oil on top of that tire. And honestly, that ends up being the only oil indication. You can see it's not caked to the bottom of the airplane, but we had a chance to take the cowling off and didn't find any oil at all. And I'll show you a picture of that. Here's the tree we killed. That's why there's the damage there. And then on the back tip of the right elevator, you can see there's a little bit of bend there. So that's the damage. Strut compressed with a flat tire, a right main gear fairing that had some damage to it, and this bend in the back of the right elevator. And other than that, and the fact that we didn't have oil, of course, yeah, this airplane's intact, and theoretically, I guess we could recover it and it's viable. I love this because I went back to look for the track log in FlightAware, and as it turns out, they tell us we're completed from our mission. So I always appreciated them for that. And there you can see the time about when it happened. All right, that's the actual track log plotted to the chart. You can kind of see where we're at. Yes, I named it Molina Mesa. I told Joe if he wants me to do a co-naming, that's fine. But I figured as a CFI, we landed there, so I get naming rights. So I have it as a waypoint now. All right. So talk to kind of that's the landing. This is probably a good time if anybody wants questions. Or Nick, let me know. You just flag me to keep going.
Yeah, so Fernando, what we're going to do is we're just going to continue. And then at the very end, we'll open up the mics for everybody.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so when we get there, like, what do we do now? You can camp out and live on a mesa, I guess, if you want to. There was no hiking out of this place. That's me, so you can prove that I was actually in this airplane and not just stealing pictures from Joe Creasy. And there's Joe, a happy Joe, and you can see over there, I'm actually doing coordination in the seat there. Just felt like a comfortable place at the moment. And then we took the cowling off to look. There's zero oil inside. I didn't see cracked in the casing. It didn't spray on the windshield. Again, there was no excessive oil leakage anywhere around that we could see. Had a couple pictures that I sent to insurance. Um, so yeah, that's like I said, there's our airplane and we'll call it our camping spot for the next certain amount of time. I'll get to how long we were on the Mesa in a while. All right, so we're cruising through here. We looked at each other like I told you. Hey, you all right? You're all right? Yep. Kind of assessed ourselves. You hurt anywhere? And Joe's like, no, I got a scratch on my left elbow. And other than that, we're there. So I had a survival vest on. One of the things we teach in these camps is what you have on you is survival gear. What you have in the back of your airplane is camping gear. So we had a fortunate outcome. Things happened. We made good decisions to mask, unfortunately, a handful of, checklist mistakes and things like that that we had missed in a slightly stressful situation. But what I had on me was a couple of devices, including one of the PJ2 Pluses handheld radios that you can pick up on Sporties, and I had a Garmin InReach Messenger. So before I stepped out of the airplane, I hit the SOS button on the InReach Messenger. And about 5 minutes later, I got a phone call. I was like, huh, I guess we have cell phone coverage. So I get a phone call. That's why you see me on the phone. And I'm talking to Garmin Emergency Services. And they're like, hey, you got a Garmin InReach Messenger? I was like, yeah. This is Fernando Molina? Yep. And then they said, well, we got an emergency SOS message from you. Are you guys okay? And I go, huh, well, I got a story for you. I'm like, we're out in the middle of a mesa, about 22.1 miles east on a 085 radial from Page, Arizona. Which, by the way, I told you I was able to use my ForeFlight. I'm thankful. That's one of the radio calls I was able to get out to air traffic control before we lost radio contact, and we had chosen our place to land. So I was pretty happy that we were able to get that coordination out and tell them where we were going. So now I tell Garmin, and Garmin Emergency Services stays on. And I'm not trying to sell the Garmin to anybody, just the idea that having emergency services on your side is immensely valuable, because for search and rescue procedures, and we teach this in our camp, you're looking to spend the night a minimum, maybe 72 hours in a off-airport landing situation, especially away from civilization. If they know where you're at, you could probably shorten it to the 24-hour point. If they don't know where you're at, you could probably count on it taking like 24 to 48 hours for them to even decide to come looking for you, and then maybe the 24 hours to find you. Those are contingent on two things. They need to figure out your condition, and they need to figure out and verify the result of your off-airport landing, right? If they don't, and they have a team out there that's, for instance, doing forensics, if they see a track log and the track log shows a 2,000 foot to minute descent for the last 600 feet, and you're at, screaming along at 250 knots, like they might sit there and make an assessment that unless somebody contacts them, that potentially this is going to be a recovery, not a pickup situation. And then they're going to take their time a little bit to come pick you up. So getting in contact and getting verified about where your location is crucially important when you go off airport in order to get your recovery going. Otherwise, think about what you pack in your airplane. Do you have water? Do you have a couple of power bars? Do you have things when you're cross countrying over this beautiful area in the mountains or the canyons or the valleys, forest areas? Are you prepared to walk out of the spot that you're flying over? And that's just a thought I'll give to you. So they stayed on the phone with us, back to the call until we got in touch with 911. They actually got us with the local 911 in Page, Arizona, or in that area at least. And then we talked to them, and we got on course with the sheriff. And about an hour and a half later, they dispatched Arizona Public Safety helicopter from Kingman, Arizona to come get us. And that's where I'll stop for this part of the what you do signal. Okay, another thing I had on me. Here's equipment. That's one of the vests that one of our gentlemen does, guy named Eric Hope. He teaches our survival vest lesson. And so this is what he suggests, which is an old military survival vest. It breathes really well. It's got a bunch of pouches. You can customize it and sew things to it. They're getting increasingly hard to find. I used to fly with this in my early military days before we got to a new version. This is what I fly with. You can find like a fisherman vest type thing, and you can see it's not too expensive. My caution is that if you're going to choose to start flying with a survival vest when you're flying cross countries over open terrain, is to do a fit check. Go ahead and grab it, do a fit check, get into your airplane, because at times I've put too much stuff in these pockets, and then it kind of gets in the way of the yoke. So watch out for that. But anyway, that's the vest I had. Here's the radio. I like the PJ2 just because I can plug my headset into it. I didn't do that. Now, on your equipment, okay? I pull out my survival radio. I'm like, this is cool. I did my Garmin call. We're getting through this. And then I pull out my radio. I'm like, oh, cool, I have a radio. And I turned it on and I put it to 121.5. And I'll pause for a second. What do you guys think? Just to let you guys stew on this a minute. What do you guys think I heard when I turned it on? Pause for somebody said meow. Saw that pop up. That's perfect. That's pretty funny. Uh, I saw nothing. Yep. Michael Dean, you got it. Yeah, the ELT started going off, and I'm right next to it. So guess how loud it was? And I was like, "This is..." Now the ELT was going off in the airplane too. So now I have the ELT going off in the airplane, and then I have it simulcast on the radio in my hand, and I'm like, excuse my language. I'm like, shit. So I turned off the radio and I threw it in the seat, and then I put it away for a while. Um, Absolute wrong thing to do with your equipment. So to debrief myself, again, I can ask you guys questions. If you guys think about what else you could do with the radio, if you go there and ELT is getting in the way. I've given a couple of these talks. A couple of common suggestions are, well, turn off your ELT. That would definitely decrease the conflict, if you will, on the frequency of having that going off in your ear. And you can't talk to anybody. So yes, and you can use 121.5 because we know that airliners are using it and passing by, so you could use that to relay. The problem with that though is if you're not found, I personally think it's a pretty big gut check to turn off your ELT. I'd be keeping that on and just keeping it on as long as possible. But yeah, it's there, and I'm going, huh. After the fact, there's a couple things. On our camp, we were actually using fingers, if anybody's heard that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we were using it as an air-to-air for the 16 airplanes that were going and flying around at Utah, so we can be reporting our positions, coordinating with each other. And if a couple of us ended up at the same geographic feature, we would deconflict our flying around the same feature with each other and not become a safety hazard. So could have done that. I also could have gone back to the frequency that I was just on with air traffic control, because if you're there, you were on the frequency you were just coordinating with, and you can get back on there and they're not going to hear you because you're below coverage, but you can definitely have people relaying. And you're on the same center freak that people are using to fly over you right now. So that's a great, great move that I could have done, but at this point, I didn't. By the way, along with fingers is another common one that's used. We call it four fingers, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. And so those are two common air-to-air frequencies. There's a couple more in the AIM that you can find that are a set as air-to-air coordination freaks. But that's my usage of the radio and a good lesson learned on knowing your equipment, which I made those mistakes. This is my messenger. I saw a couple of comments about people. Thank you, Michael. You're right. It's just commonly used, especially to deconflict from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, since a lot of people sometimes will tend to use that when you're in backcountry. Okay, so Garmin Introduce Messenger. It's my version. There's another version. It looks kind of a little bit like a small walkie-talkie. Lots of other PLBs, personal locator beacons type stuff. There's some that require no subscription, but they are, you register with the Survival Recovery Center, and they're basically a survival recovery device only. In the case of the inReach and the two inReaches, what you can do is you can register it, and there's a messenger app. Now, the messenger app is awesome. It lets you basically text from your phone through the app. It's not your actual messaging like normal iPhone Messenger or whatever your phone has. It's a Garmin Messenger app. And what the Garmin Messenger app is, it goes ahead and sends out a text. And if you have cell phone signal, it'll use the cell phone signal. If you don't use cell phone signal, it'll use through the Garmin satellite coverage. So it's kind of cool and it's pretty flexible. So I get out there and I hit my SOS button, get my phone call, and come back. And then they say, hey, can you give us an updated message? And I thought, hey, plus I'll do that and then I'll text my wife. So I pull out my phone and I go to the app and guess what it says? Pause for effect. It says updating. So I'm sitting on a mesa, going through this emergency landing, go out there. The SOS works great. Garmin called me. They asked me to do an updated location to them. And I'm like, sure, right on it. Thanks. Glad to be talking to you. And then I'm like, crap, I can't use the messaging function of my Garmin Reach. So what a waste, because I didn't prep my gear before I went flying. And all you needed to do is go out, and before you go flying, is you go to the app, you make sure it's connected to your device, kind of like you do with like ForeFlight and your, let's say, iPad and a Sentry or any of the GPS devices that you can use in your airplane. You got to sync them up. Otherwise, the fact that you have this awesome, cool app on your phone you can use with this convenient messaging device becomes useless in the situation. So back to knowing your equipment. Make sure if you have stuff with you that you're using and potentially you can need in survival, that you have practiced with it and that you've actually prepped it for the flight that you're about to go on. And that's what happened to me. Now they were able to ping me and they came back, they got an updated location. I hadn't moved, of course, but they were just doing that for the updated coordination as they were passing to the Survival Recovery Center and again, verifying our condition and our location. So that's on the Messenger. There's other cool ones out there. I encourage you to take a look at them. I think there's a sale on them right now, is what somebody texted me from our camp that we just did. So here's a track log and it shows you the mesa based on going down there. And I bring this up because the cool thing that happened next is after we lost radio contact, air traffic control had enough information that they started calling folks in the sector and saying, can anybody come out here and help us with a downed aircraft? As it turns out, we had 16 airplanes at camp, and a number of them were transitioning and going home to the west and going through Page, Arizona to get gas. And one of my friends, Ben Samra, he was one of the CFIs in the camp with his client, and they had just taken off and they were going westbound. And they were on Page CTAF, and they just changed over to Center to get flight following and get handed off to LA Center. And when they caught on there, they were maybe 10 miles west of Page going westbound, and they heard the radio chatter. So Ben thought right away, like maybe it's one of our airplanes, but he didn't recognize the tail number. So they turn around, they decided to chime in. I think they were trying to talk on like a PC-12, and the PC-12 was like, sure, we'll try, but we need to get approval from our passengers. And they're kind of going through that rigmarole. But Ben, in a total baller CFI experienced pilot move, flies back over Page with his pilot, and they get coverage, and they go ahead and they add the ADS-B from our tail number, download it to Google Earth, and that's what you see here, because it points to our mesa. And he was able to use that to fly over to us and go ahead and fly past us on a first pass. And here's his first pass. And you can see our mesa. So he passes over, he looks. Here's a good spot to talk about signaling. I don't know if you can tell where we are in the image. I'm not going to back it up now, but there's two of us standing underneath the wing. He had to fly by, do his video, and then while he was flying, they were circling for the next pass, zoom in, back on his video, and then see that there was two bodies standing, thankfully, underneath the wing. Otherwise, back to survival and search and rescue. If they don't know your condition, even if they found you, they're not going to send somebody looking for you. This is his second pass. You can kind of see our mesa. So, 13 minutes after our landing, Ben and his airplane come on by. You can see that drop off on the side of the mesa I told you about, right near our airplane. an easy slope and then a really steep drop off. So yeah, so he was able to contact air traffic control, verify our condition, tell them we've located the airplane. So we have confirmation of our location and confirmation of our condition. And then thankfully, that helps Arizona Search and Rescue to know that, okay, we've got somebody to actually pick up and then kind of get going on their way. Here we are after, that's Arizona Public Safety helicopter.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Creasy, successful off-airport landing with yours truly. See the airplane in the background there. Things worked out. We had not one but two rescue helicopters.
Yeah.
God bless these dudes, first responders. Happy to be with you.
So, a little happy moment, being able to be happy that we got a helicopter to come pick us up, and not just one, but two. Now, Jason Miller, who runs the camps, him and our friend Eric Hope, I told you about, who does the survival vest lesson for us, they were still back at Monument Valley. And as I found out I had cell coverage, I started texting them. And so what they did is they finished packing up all their stuff, and then they kind of hopped up and came on over, and they were a second successful verification of our location. For them, we got our poop together and we pulled out a signal mirror. And then I figured out, I can get on fingers on my radio. And I was able to successfully signal them and talk them onto our location. And so they went over to Page, and about 30 minutes after our landing, they were able to get over there, and they went over to the medevac operation that's there. I apologize, I don't remember the name of it. But it's the one at Page, Arizona, right next to the FBO in the corner for anybody who's been there. And he said, hey, my friends are out on a mesa. Can you guys go help them out, pick them up? And they were like, sure. They didn't have any other things going, and that's their job. They can use it as a training flight no matter what. And so, yeah, we got two helicopters for a free helicopter ride. I don't recommend for you guys, if you want a helicopter ride, to do it this way, but there we go. Shout out first responders, Arizona Public Safety. Next shout out, there's my helicopter pilot. His name's Sean. I got to see him this last weekend, and we got to chat, and I got to send him some pictures, which is pretty cool to show him the indication. There's the helicopter, or I'm sorry, the airplane. We're getting ready to go back to civilization. There's our crew, EMTs, new best friends when you get into a helicopter with these folks. And that's me, ready to go. All right, here's our last look at November 3444 Romeo on the way out. Now you can see the rocks that are all the way around, basically making their decision of where to land for us. We started our adventure camp this year with this talk for the camp, and to tell everybody, hey, let's put in context the flying we're about to do all weekend long. As it turns out, a lot of folks decided to take down the coordinates and figure out where it was. And we had a lot of folks flying over it. And that swing from a vine technique I told you about, this rocky area that you see long of the mesa, and earlier when you saw it on both sides of the mesa, completely surrounded this entire area. And there was a point where when you get over the mesa and away from the flat spot that was behind us, that we could have turned around and landed at, but didn't know about and weren't thinking about at the time. When we're in the middle of this rocky area, this mesa is literally the only place to land. And it was pretty crazy to come to that revelation, going back to visit the scene of the crime, if you will. There's our crew back at Page. Last after actions, there's me with my vest. I'm kind of attached to it at this point. But there was a sheriff there waiting for us as a result of the 911 call and all those things. He was tasked to be there and wait for us to start a phone call with NTSB and the FAA. And it wasn't retribution or any kind of a thing. It was just, we want to get your facts while they're fresh in your minds. And so for folks who have heard or may have themselves had a student or themselves going, I'm not going to declare an emergency right now. And they're worried about the paperwork, right? You remember that you don't only have to put in a report for an accident for the NTSB if requested. Otherwise, if your actions are logical and the things happen and they can take down a statement and it answers all of the questions, you probably won't ever have to file a report. And in our case, we did our phone call and they were like, what's the condition of the airplane? And we explained the damage. And they said, what's the any injuries? And I'm like, well, Joe had a scratch to his left elbow. And he's like, all right, I'm done. And he handed it to the FAA rep that was also on the phone from the Las Vegas FSDO. And so that was it. That was the TSB investigation. Below a certain amount of damage and below a certain amount of injury, they're just going to hand it back to the FAA and the local FSDO to go ahead and investigate what happened to the airplane. And so there we were. Let's see. There's the airplane, and I'll get to a couple of the questions here in a minute. And the cool thing is being able to debrief with MB, our air traffic controller, was super awesome and insightful. And I consider it like a massive plus for airplane and pilot to controller communication, debrief, and relation, right? Turns out MB, after hearing the story and I told him our side, he told us his side, and I got to learn about the radio coverage and the stuff that we were doing. He actually took this situation. I sent him some of our pictures, and then he went and flew it in Microsoft Flight Sim. And there you go. I'll compare and contrast. One more time. Which I thought was just wicked cool. Just having a controller go out there and want to do the extra to go out there and actually fly what we did, because he wanted to be able to experience, at least via Flight Sim, what we experienced and be able to pass it on to his crew. I can't credit enough how cool that is in my mind. We're also trying to see when we're going to go ahead and be able to go out and debrief with Denver Center and maybe in person and go ahead and give them this presentation. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay.
Hey,
That's our story.
Hello. So, okay, good. So we'll take questions in a second. I need to release this product right away, and then we can take some questions and I can put our CFI class into another room. Good. Great story. You must know Joe Chenal. He's an F-15 Strike Eagle pilot as well.
We flew together. He was actually he was F-15C model pilot. He now runs Chenault Flying Service in
I know
North
him
Vegas.
well.
Yep, and we actually worked together on flight testing at Nellis before he retired. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so look here. What we're going to do, we're going to release this product here, and then we'll take some questions from this. So this is our Private Pilot Smart Study Pro. It's going to be in the chat. And basically what it is audio presentations for every task in the Private Pilot ACS, including the maneuvers. It goes through all the knowledge, all the risk management, and all the skills. And it's about 11 hours in content. It's designed to be listened to in your car, but there is video if you happen to be a place to see it. And then there's companion PDFs for each of those lessons with figures. Sometimes there's notes, sometimes there's this, that, there's stuff in there to companion with that. So you can see the list price. It's half of that, but it's going to go in the chat, and that will be released today. And if you're pursuing a private pilot certificate, or that, great to have one. We also have that for the CFI and are already released, and I'm working on the instrument one. So that's that. That's what's there. For the CFI class, I think we said we were going to give this to you, something like that, or some discount or something like a huge discount. Okay, that's why we're going to release it today, to make sure that got out, and then we'll take it up for questions. Again, if you want wings credits in the chat, if you want the deal here, and this will also go out if you were on a previous email list, it'll go out today or tomorrow for the offer, but it won't last very long. We usually don't last, the offers don't last very long. So there's that. Okay, I've got that. That's where I'm going to leave it. And then I'm going to set up breakout rooms in the background while we field some questions here. So I don't know, I'll let Nick drive away to how he wants to do that, but I'm going to set up the breakout rooms now so we can bring our CFI class into a separate room. Anyway, it's top of the hour, so I'll log out here and I'll leave it back to Nick and to Fernando.
Let me cover a couple real quick that I know I saw out there. The setup I had was I was briefing this off my iPad with Keynote, and that way I can get to my flight track log. And so far that's appeared to be valuable with a bunch of CFIs here. You guys can tell me if you like the technique or have suggestions. But I had my MacBook up, and so the questions were popping up. That's why I answered a couple in real time. Anyhow, what happened to the airplane? I always leave that out on purpose because I know it's killing people. So when you have an airplane out in a location like that, the way to get it off of the inhospitable location is to sling load it with a helicopter. If they can put it on a truck and get it out there, but there was going to be no truck going to the Mesa. So you can Google that, and there's a couple of really cool ones of an aircraft recovery. A little fun fact about sling load with a helicopter is one, you have to have an helicopter that has useful load that's above, around 2,700 pounds for, the average GA airplane-ish. And that's turns out that's not hard for a utility helicopter. And then when you sling load it, the helicopter has to fly slower than the airplane's stall speed. Because if not, the actual airplane will actually start flying underneath the sling load. And so I learned this when I'm going through the coordination that they're telling me. And I was like, holy cow, like that's crazy. Because then after that, if it stalls after it starts flying, then that's a massive weight shift for the helicopter. So you can't do that. So it's actually kind of crazy. So basically, it's stuck to, about 60 knots, maybe 50 knots, going across the ground as airspeed. All the coordination with the FISDO went to insurance. They said, hey, we're going to wait till insurance recovers it. I passed insurance all the info. Insurance took 6 weeks to coordinate to go pick this airplane up. And when they got there, the wind had flipped the airplane over. So a perfectly flyable airplane, when they fixed the motor and figured out why the oil was gone, turned into a total. And now, as opposed to recovering it to fix it, they took it down to, I believe, Mesa, Arizona. Might have been Phoenix, but anyway, they took it down there to a salvage yard. And I got an update about 4 to 6 weeks ago that it just got auctioned off for parts. So I'm hoping that the FISDO airworthiness inspector, who wants to be able to debrief this and provide feedback on what happened to that motor, is going to be able to get them with the serial numbers and figure out what happens from the maintenance of that airplane. So that is the status of our airplane. Intentionally, I don't think it's been touched since then. All of the airplane inspection stuff where they break down and do metallurgy and they do all the continuity controls and all the things you read in an accident report, that's what the NTSB does when they decide they're going to do a full report of an airplane and they have money in their budget to provide that. When they kick it to the FAA, the FAA is like, we're going to wait till somebody pays to open the motor and then we'll report on it. And that's kind of where we're at. So there's the answer of where the airplane is. Let's see. I think there was a couple of questions about, well, I'll go from there. I'll open mic it now because I remember a couple of smatterings, but I want to screw up somebody's question. Go ahead.
Perfect. So the mics are open, everybody.
So
Hey.
I have a question. Did you have renter's insurance? I mean, you said you had rented the airplane. Was that a renter's policy?
It was a rental policy. Desert Flying Club at Boulder City. When you become a member, then your dues actually go towards the policy, and that's the way that flying club is set up.
I see.
Yep.
So
Obviously, buyer beware when you're renting, so make sure that you're covered because this could have been expensive for somebody.
hey, Fernando, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you know what the survival rate is for people who have an off airport? So I'm a not so proud member of the off airport landing club myself, and thank goodness I'm still here. Just this is something that's crossed my mind. I don't know if you know the answer to that question. And by the way, I second on that too. I caution all pilots to make sure you are fully insured in the aircraft that you are aviating in. I was not, and it was a nightmare. So,
Oh, wow. Can you give a couple quick details of just over like big wave top of kind of where and how long ago it happened?
It was 2021, and in the Northeast New Jersey, at an off airport landing. And I was ferrying an aircraft with somebody, and I was flying the plane. And so, I took responsibility for it. It was, I was pilot in command. I was responsible for that flight, but I was not on the insurance policy. So
Yeah. What'd you land in? Like, what was it, a field or was it a road or?
It was a field in the middle of northern New Jersey, probably the only one.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Okay, cool. Thanks for the context. I don't, there is a percentage, something like, for instance, 3% of off-airport landings are a result of a power loss. Well, I'm sorry, 3% of emergency landings in general, right? Unfortunately, a number of those end up being not successful for the pilot. And I don't have the percentage for that, but what I will point out is one of the things I like to teach in my risk management, and I like to teach risk management as a portion of every lesson to include the first lesson with the private pilot. Now, I don't teach a private pilots basic, but just whenever I just start working with somebody, I let them know, like, hey, look, we have habit patterns and discipline, and accomplishing those and all the procedures we're going to run through or learn or talk about, that leads us to the amount of safety we possibly can have when we're flying. Because the only way to have zero risk in flying is to not fly. So we're going to do airworthiness checks. We're going to check the paperwork. We're going to check the maintenance. We're going to do our run-up checks before we go flying to make sure the motor is in proper order. And then all along, we're going to have a plan, and we're going to gauge our plan based off of weather conditions and any changing factors. And we'll change the plan if we have to. And every time we identify our risk, we make sure that we're either going to avoid it, we're going to mitigate it, or we're just going to accept that risk. But we accept it knowing what the risk is as opposed to ignoring the process. So it's kind of how I think through all this, is that we become safe pilots by going through that process habitually for about everything we do, and just continuing to keep on over and over and over doing it in a cyclical process until the airplane is safely put away in a hangar. So with that in mind, you want to put yourself in the 3%, right? So many of these accidents, unfortunately, when we're reading about them, and as a safety officer for Desert Flying Club, and then my new job here with All in Aviation at Henderson, the idea of reading these reports for all of us to learn from are somebody who skipped a pre-flight or didn't sump their gas, or didn't, dipstick their gas personally, as opposed to just taking for granted what the fueler put on the piece of paper. Those kinds of things, along with, paying attention to when was the last inspection on an item, or when was the next required inspection on an item, or annual, or all those things, right? So a little bit of a soapbox here, but Tom, for your edification, that's how we get to hopefully becoming in the 3%. And then the rest of that is our procedures to help us get to a positive outcome. And in my point, I can tell you, like the swinging from a vine, the emergency action steps for a power loss, the forced landing steps checklist for the final landing portion, I had not taught that lesson. And I always do teach like the ABCs and some of the techniques, but I hadn't taught that lesson in so long that I didn't have the recency for it to be automatic in my brain. And I kick myself to this day for it. However, back to discipline and habit patterns, Joe and I used our discipline and habit patterns to do enough right things for the successful outcome. And Tom, you did the same thing. It's super easy to beat yourself up about this. So for a mental health aspect for everybody, like super easy to beat yourself up and think about all the mistakes you made. But the good thing you did was have a successful outcome from an off-airport landing. And I'm going to leave that at that for everybody.
Thank you. And I am, after, 2025, I've been up a few times this year. I'm working on getting my medical back, and you put on a great presentation.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, awesome. And anybody, like, reach out if you want to.
What are you doing?
I'm happy to have conversations with folks or talk about this or the other topics, such as picking out your survival gear. What do you do? Signaling. There's a ton of extra topics that can come out of this as a lesson all by themselves. And I'm committed to providing as much learning out of this experience as I can.
Hi, Fernando. Two questions, if I may, please.
Hi, Amy.
One is, have they ever figured out the reason why the engine lost the oil? And secondly, can you summarize the steps that a surviving pilot in the field needs to take to to survive if they have to stay there 72 hours, 24 hours, and so on?
Okay, I'm going to summarize, but it's going to be really, it won't come close to doing it justice. Our survival lesson on our airplane camp is 3 hours, and that's a short lesson. We have an expert. He's an excellent survival expert. His name's Howard Donner, which is a bit of irony. He's not related to the Donner Party. That's the natural question. And yeah, and he does a really quick run through of gear and what kinds of gear are useful. Because if you go through the P-Hack, we've added a survival lesson to the ground school app that Jason Miller has from Northern Finer Points, because we found this important enough that you really got to think through it as a specific topic. So when you land, you have to assess obviously your condition. You have to inventory your stuff, and you have to decide, okay, what's my next step? And you have to prioritize, like, do I have any kind of personal or medical or other conditions that have to get assessed first? And then prioritize those things to the next thing you obviously want to do is start some form of signaling or preparation for signaling in order to try to get picked up. Having a PLB type device is huge in that process. And largely, I'm going to use my own terminology. Search and Rescue Center will still tell you the advertised. If they know where you're at and condition, they'll probably get to you within 24 hours. If they don't, it's at least 72 hours or more. So being prepared to spend the night out when you're cross country over a pretty uninhabited terrain is something you really should consider and you should pack for. Lastly, you got to remember there's always a fire hazard for a off-airport landing or forced landing anywhere. So very real possibility that you might have to just jump out of the airplane and that's all you can do. And whatever is on you, to include, is your cell phone on you, or do you have it on a stand, or do you have it on a clipboard, or do you have it in a pocket for the airplane pocket? Like, those are important considerations if you think you're going to want to take that thing with you. And I would just step through that chair fly-ish. What would I do if I had to egress in a hurry? I'll leave it at that. There are some great survival lessons that are out there on YouTube. And then if anybody wants, this is a CFI group. You are able to join the CFI club for the ground school app and go ahead and preview all those lessons. And if you choose that you like it, it's for free as a CFI. You just log in as from the website, and from the app, you can actually preview all that stuff, and you can see there's a survival lesson there. So I'll point you that way. As a bonus, Jason also through the app has a office hours. I'm able to say all this because him and Mike Schiffler are friends, so taking a little leeway. But yeah, he has office hours, and then these are conversations we can continue more. So I'll stop there on the survival lesson, Amy. Hopefully that answers part of it for you.
And what about the reasons for the loss of oil?
Yep. Thanks for not letting me get away with that. I told you about the condition of the airplane and the fact that nobody has opened up that motor yet, to my knowledge, and I'm hoping that will change. Our leading suspicion, based on an AMP, Ben Samurai is also an AMP, is because there was no oil sprayed over the cowling, sprayed on the windshield, sprayed under the bottom of the airplane. Most likely the oil would have left via the exhaust pipe. And so that likely is either a valve or a cylinder losing its seal, or maybe doing a deformation due to the heat. It's getting ready to go through an annual. And then maybe it just kind of basically allowed that oil to just seep out and go out the exhaust. That's total speculation.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Fernando, good idea to take tie-down ropes and secure the airplane before you leave it.
Yes, that's another debrief item that I didn't think
Good
about.
idea for equipment, when you're going off that over that.
I had the claw system, and because we're on an adventure camp, a lot of us had a system so that we can do a tie down. Monument Valley has a tie down cable, but with 16 airplanes, we couldn't fit there, and like four airplanes had to go, off the cable. And so, yeah, the claw system is what I ended up buying, and I kind of kicked myself because I left it at the airplane and I didn't tie the airplane down. So yeah, that's a great point if you hope to get the airplane recovered.
If you fly into Death Valley, by the way, Furnace Creek, you need to take tie-down ropes because there aren't any.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
thanks for that.
and you get very high winds there too.
I'm curious. It was such a damage-free landing, all things considered. Did it ding your insurance, especially when it ended up a loss because of their delay in getting to it?
It all went to the owner's insurance. So yeah, it really didn't affect me at all as a renter. Well, I'm the CFI for the renter. Joe Creasy was the renter, but yeah, that's why the Desert Flying Club, how they posture the insurance is that the owners own the policy for their airplanes, and then the renters are covered under the policy as being members of the club. So
Do you have
thankfully, yeah,
to
no,
do
go
you have
ahead.
to claim do you have to claim an incident now out of curiosity when you fill out insurance forms or
No, no.
well, that's
Nope.
awesome.
Yeah, it's there's actually no report um, either with the FAA or the NTSB from the incident because there was no damage.
But they might know about it now.
No, I've had my talks with them. I'm not trying to hide anything, but yes, I'm really hoping. In fact, as I found out more and when I found out about the auction of the airplane, I passed that on to the airworthiness inspector because he does, and I'm anxious to have him get a report from whoever tears that motor down to see what they found.
Fernando, where are you located?
I'm in Vegas. Desert Flying Club is at Boulder City, BVU. And then my new job, let me see, show my logo,
Yeah.
is all in aviation. It's actually a Cirrus dealer at Henderson Airport, HND. As of next week, hopefully we're going to have a Husky there and become the Southwest Husky dealer. So again, anybody wants to do backcountry and fly a Husky, let me know.
Thank you.
Where is the wings credit in the chat? I haven't been able to find it.
Yeah, let me post that for you again.
So, question on your ELT.
Yes, sir.
Did you have the 406 megahertz ELT or the older one?
It was, but it was also transmitting 151 or 121.5, sorry.
Okay, so it's the newer one. It did not have a GPS source? Is that correct?
It should have. The airplane had a 430, I think, in it.
So did you hear that they had used that ELT signal to help locate you, or?
I don't believe it ever got to that part of the process of the normal survival recovery center coordination.
Interesting. Okay.
Because we basically had immediate communication directly to Garmin, and Garmin Survival Services, I think is their name, do coordinate with the Survival Recovery Center. And probably when they saw that it was being handled locally and with local resources, what appeared to me in the coordination of all this, that Survival Recovery Center probably noted it, I'm sure, knowing how they operate, but I don't think they needed to get involved really beyond that.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
If you talk to Civil Air Patrol, who's like part of this whole thing,
Yep.
it takes about 24 hours just to get the coordination usually, and this isn't Civil Air Patrol, this is like, professionals. It's about 24 hours for them so the more information they have and so on and so forth, the quicker the process goes. So that's what's so cool about the Garmin InLink, and the fact that you can, as long as you become proficient with it, it's really just, I think you just hit the button SOS, and the next thing you knew, everything was coming through your phone. And how many text messages did you guys actually have on the ground between you and the SOS services, out of curiosity?
Well, again, I failed at having my prep going, so my app tried to download an update when I tried to use it. I should have checked that and made sure that it was up to date before I went flying, which is, oh, by the way, if anybody uses ForeFlight, if you don't use ForeFlight, there is build yourself an electronic flying checklist for your EFB or whatever other devices you do, which should be night before, make sure you're charged up, as well as check your apps, make sure they're updated. If your ForeFlight needs an app update, and remember we're at, every 27 days now, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but so we're getting regular map updates. So it's really easy to go flying and go, shoot, I didn't do the map update. And then sometimes it'll even block some of your functions. In the case of the messenger, yeah, I didn't have that. And so we had absolute total luck, if you will, or God was on our side, or pick your explanation of how you want to do that or describe that we had cell phone coverage. So I was able to go ahead and just text people via the phone. While we're on that, by the way, and I remember this was a question that popped up, so I'm glad it brought it in my brain. Remember, your iPhone now has some emergency services that are part of it. I actually have a video that I took from this last flight where it ran me through the directions, and it just tells you like when you're in zero signal and it shows SOS and a little satellite on the upper right corner for your signal strength. It'll direct you to go ahead and point towards the satellite and get signal coverage so that it can connect to the satellite. It gives you a green light to let you know that happens. And then you can message via satellite at that point, kind of in an SOS mode.
Yeah.
Again, I would absolutely practice that before you have to do it in a real stressful situation.
And the other part of that is that that was a version update, I think like a year and a half ago. So
Yeah,
just be careful because most likely if you're running an older iPhone, you don't actually have that capability.
yeah.
So make
That's a
sure you
good point.
actually really actually practice it because you may think you have it and you don't even have it. So make sure you actually know
Yep,
your like everything, know your systems.
yep. Eh,
Fernando, great job. This is Deb Gangwish from Nebraska.
Oh,
Um,
hey.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of multitasking, but I heard you talk about energy dissipation. And
Yep.
earlier this year, I did a little tiny bit of work with Rich Stoll, and he talked about that very thing. Could you expand on that? Because we often do. I believe I heard you say you were carrying too much speed. Uh,
Well,
and
no,
maybe
no, not too much. We
not too,
were,
okay,
yeah.
but if you could just talk to that a little, because I think that's one of those things that, when we're looking for a spot to land, we're so accustomed to airports, unless we're doing a lot of backcountry flying, that we may not need as much space as we think, et cetera. But just expand on that for me, please. And thank you.
No,
You did a fantastic job.
thank you. So, I'm talking to a large group of CFIs and other flyers. So that was during the presentation and just talking. So I'm glad you pointed that out because there's a ton to this topic. And that's why we spend part of the ground school at our adventure camp just to talk about energy. And thankfully, the FAA via the handbooks has changed that and they've added a bunch of energy discussion. So, one, follow your POH. I'd be remiss if I don't mention that as step one. Best glide. Best glide is best glide is best glide. There is best endurance. There's a fun CFI topic there when you want to nerd out. And I know there's plenty of folks that have gone both ways on that. Although in GA, typically everybody teaches just best glide. Best endurance is for folks who want to go the extra mile. Now, for those two thoughts, that's the best way to get to the landing spot. The important thing when you get successfully to a landing spot, which will always happen, right? Because gravity works 100% of the time. You'll always get to a landing spot. When you get there, ideally you plan for it and it's not obstructed. There's no ruts, no little valleys. It's not super rocky like was all around my mesa. So ideally, you're not dealing with those because those are going to be dealing with nature as you go. But regardless, you want to land with the minimum energy possible. Let's picture, I know Jason likes to use this example, so I like to shamelessly, again, use his because I love and I've adopted a lot of his techniques. Let's say you're in the middle of a city, like here in Vegas, and you pick a football field, right? You've got 300 feet, 100 yards to land, plus or minus goalposts and the track and that kind of stuff. And hopefully there's no kids out there, so you're going to make your emergency turn into their emergency. People know about landing on roads. You have the speeds to consider for merging with traffic and doing things like that. So there's a lot of techniques out there. But all things being equal, when your airplane touches down, you have the force that it's going to meet whatever it contacts on the ground with. Simple math, force equals mass times acceleration. Acceleration is time times velocity squared, right? So if we just simplify all of that discussion to what do I need to know as a pilot, your velocity is the single most important variable in how much force you're going to hit something with when you land. So if you land at 40 knots for an average stall speed or around that time, that's 50% different. I'm sorry, that's 50% different than landing at 60 knots. Obviously, that scales up and down. If you're in a Cirrus, your energy is a little higher than that. But the velocity squared means it's like 75% more energy to land 20 knots faster. So I mentioned our approach speed and our best glide.
Hi, we got a
There's
little
two
building.
things there. One is when you're in a desolate area like that, we have a mindset of, man, I hope we make this mesa. There's two things going for us. One is standard landing aim point analysis, and you must be good, have practiced, and nail your aim point when you pick an emergency landing spot so that you can pick it, fly to it, and successfully take the space that you actually are trying to land on, and then be able to do that and not like hit a fence or a wall or something on the other end. That means, and it's hindsight, but when we were doing our landing, we were doing best glide, and we were a little bit of puck factor trying to make the mesa. But it turns out we had about 20 knots to our stall speed of extra energy to go ahead and land with. And I think that successfully helped our flying, the coordination I did, and all that to where we were 500 feet into the mesa when we landed. That was much more comforting than when we were staring at a whole lot of rocks. And then actually having the rollout not be too bad. It was about 900 feet. And that's because we delayed, like we were so happy we landed on the mesa. We didn't touch the brakes for a little while until like we hit a rock. We're like, huh, let's hit the brakes. So that's kind of how that happened. And I hope that helps answer the energy part and I didn't shortchange it for you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. It absolutely did.
Hey, Fernando.
Yep.
Can I just like can I beg everyone and ask your opinion on this? Because the one thing I wish I had done was I've always been reluctant to slip the airplane, and I would want to beg everybody to get comfortable slipping the airplane from 1,000 feet straight down to the ground to help manage your energy, because I know I slipped it a little bit and I nosed the plane over. And what do you think happened to the airspeed indicator? Whoosh.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I would just want to beg people to practice and get comfortable slipping all the way down to your point of intended runway landing.
Well,
or
we talk about slipping to hit the aim point, but you bring up a good point. Not everybody focuses and teaches when you're slipping to manage that airspeed. And now is a great point you just brought out because you're right. That actually came up with I told you he was a recent private pilot in the flight, my camp this weekend. That one way in, one way out airport, where I said you really have to make a go around decision early because there's a mesa in your face when you go around and you're in high density altitude. We did 2 go arounds on one of our days. It was the end of a long day of flying. You could tell he was tired. I wish I would have anticipated a little better and just flown the landing for him, but he just for 3 approaches came in really high, and I was like, "There's no way we're going to land on this thing," even though it's close to 3,000 feet. So I told him to go around, and his second go around, he didn't manage his flaps really well, all that kind of stuff. We ended up with like maybe 200 foot per minute climb. And we flew over a whole bunch of trailers at a Indian reservation at about 300 feet. But that was all we had. And I was like, aim for the middle of those 2 trailers because that was it. But it goes to all of that stuff. Had he had slip in his habit pattern, and that's what I did on the third one, I just took it over and slipped for him. Then we probably would have been able to just make those landings happen instead of kind of put ourselves in a little bit of a risky situation by flying low over trailers. But great point, Tom. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
I'd like to make a suggestion for all of the CFIs that are online here. I learned to fly at a grass strip that was run by a bunch of World War II veterans. And the one takeaway, which I think about basically every flight ever since, it makes it easy to remember what you have to take on flights, is dress like you're going to walk home. And if you just teach your students that one sentence, it makes it real easy on every flight to figure out what they need to bring with them. Depending where I'm going, I'll bring extra blankets, heavy boots, water, snacks, because I think, all right, what if I go down and I'm 100 miles in the middle of nowhere? What am I going to do? So just remembering dress like you're going to walk home is the easiest sentence to remember, and it's stuck with me for all these years. I think it's a good thing to pass along to students.
Yeah, that's awesome. Somebody did post, they saw, I guess, online, yes, the InReach Messenger is on sale. I think $150 off, so $250 on Amazon right now. So I'm not trying to tell you got to buy that one. I would just say research what you want. If you want the no frills version that's an emergency only, or if you want the one that you can go hiking and use it as a text tool when you're out in the middle of the mountains. So just kind of research and pick your own, but that's a cool. Thanks, Mark. I think you posted that that inReach is on sale right now.
Does it require a subscription?
Yes. Yeah. You'll go through Garmin, excuse me. Go through Garmin and there's a subscription service there. And you have a like unlimited messaging. They've changed now to where you always have a base and you can actually suspend it for a month. So you're not paying, I think it's $19 a month or something. So
There's
when you're
another
not
one.
using it, I'm
Sorry to
sorry.
interrupt. I thought you were done. There's another one
No.
called Zoleo, Zoleo. Does the
Yep.
exact same thing, a little bit less expensive.
Yep.
And then if you are a T-Mobile customer for $10 a month, now you can have satellite messaging full time.
Oh, that's cool. I am T-Mobile. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did a test with Starlink, and now they do a $10 monthly subscription.
Cool. Buyer beware, right? If you didn't pre-flight your phone when you go flying, and if it's not on you, like in your pocket or on a vest, you may not have that phone with you when you land somewhere. So have a plan for how you're going to want to do that and how you might egress in a hurry.
Now, just to expand on the Garmin inReach and then also the portable radio, you mentioned the vest that you wear. I was just curious that is there a resource you could point us to? I don't want to tie it up too much during this conversation of the other items you do carry in your vest, and depending on the type of flight over certain types of terrain, do you sometimes change up what you may carry in the vest or add certain life safety items to the vest?
Yes, if you look, and I would point you all again, we can get into a whole survival discussion. I'd be happy to do it as another Zoom someday, or if you want to for your flying club or school or whatever. I'm happy to share this message with whoever because I feel there's enough lessons that everybody can use that go beyond just practicing emergency landings. But to your point, I would point you back. If you go to the ground school, I created after the incident. I created a survival lesson and it goes over gear and it goes over the action items and it goes over those things. So I'd encourage you to do at least the trial. Again, as CFIs, you can use it for free. And if you feel like you want to encourage it for your students, obviously, I feel like it's a good product. I've been working on it for 5 years, 6 years. But yeah, there's a whole lesson there. If anybody really wants extra information, let me know and then just contact me. I think Nick, is my information available for people to contact me, or I can put that in the newsletter, I guess, for folks who are going to get the newsletter.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll do is you can just send me whatever you want, and I'll make sure it gets out to everybody here in the next few days.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. Yeah, it would be helpful because, and I'll look into that, just because I fly out of the Buffalo, New York, Western New York area, and I hit everything from Lake Erie to Canada, to urban area Buffalo, and then northwestern Pennsylvania is pretty rural,
Yep.
so all different types of terrain.
Yeah. And that's a great example if we go more into the energy discussion, right? Like there were times on our camp where we were swinging from a vine and I was doing it habitually with my student and I flew with two different pilots. And so a couple times you look down and I was like, there is literally zero place to land right now unless I fly into the canyon and down into the river that's way down there. But hey, we'd be near a water source. There you got to think about blanking of your radio or blanking with your GPS, but you do what you got to do, again, to maximize your outcome and not run out of Swiss cheese, which I'm pretty thankful we did.
I was curious.
Good.
I used to fly down in Albuquerque in the days it was A7s and then out of the Aero Club with a little T41. And I learned about micro winds and stuff down low. How much of your decision was based on your winds or your assessment of the winds, or was it just 100%? That's the only postage stamp I can hit.
It was the only place to land. So yeah, I would encourage that you actually maximize what the effects of the wind are when you're picking a landing spot. But in our case, there was no option. So it was just land on the mesa and do our best to get there.
I'm still blown away at how well you folks did that.
Appreciate that. Me and Joe got a chance. He was on the camp again this year. He's a hoot. He wants to go on the adventure camps from now on. So he's just going to be a regular. And I'm trying to convince him to get his CFI. But we got to hug it out a little bit when we met up on the camp this year. It's kind of cool since we both had flown over the Mesa as a reunion.
How much is the adventure camp?
I'm going to defer you to the website there, but learnthefinerpoints.com, both will get you to the app and the website. I'll share it with Nick to put on the newsletter. It's approximately, off the top of my head, like around 5,000. Of course, I never pay this, but I think that's what I remember it is. And then there's a CFI bill. So CFI, if you ever are able to get on one at camp, or if you want to fly it, then you pay for the CFI. I think it's yeah, I don't want to get into the numbers here too much, but it's on the website there. And then if you rent a plane, then you're going to be paying for the cover for the rental and gas.
Fernando, could you
Yes, sir.
address the swinging from the vine concept?
Yeah, so stealing it from Jason, but and I know other people use it, but that's where I learned it from, is to give him credit, is act like you're a monkey, right? When a monkey is swinging through vines, uh, you can visualize that he is on a vine and he swings it. Let's say he leaves the tree and he's hanging on to a vine until he grabs the next vine. And then he grabs that vine and then he lets go of the vine behind him and then he goes forward and he swings to the next vine and holds on to the vine he's on until he gets to the next one. And that's the concept of keeping track of and monitoring possible emergency landing sites. So just do it habitually. We talk about it. I know lots of pilots and CFIs, and I've had them do ground schools, and we say, hey, monitor, emergency landing sites. But how habitual you are about it is really important, in my opinion. And I'm emphasizing it because it bit me on this day. I wasn't thinking that, and it just wasn't, there's no recency in it for me, even though I teach it to people, like I said, like most GA pilots do and CFIs. And so I completely forgot what was behind me. It could have been a cool move to make a 90 right and 90 left. That's one technique. Or I had a friend who said, just make a 45 turn and you should be able to look behind you as well as what's in front of you and assess. With zero options but that mesa in front of us, all we wanted to do is just point to it and try to make it. So that's what we did as a decision. But yeah, in hindsight, had we taken off out of Monument Valley and been like, okay, right now we're clearing the mesa, but if I turn away from the mesa, then I go to lower terrain and I can lay it on the desert floor. I'm over the mesa now. Here's flat spots on the mesa, or I'm getting to the point where I can glide over the other edge and then go land on the desert floor. Here's a road, found a road that looks like a suitable landing spot, and just thinking about it, declaring it as a crew to the people you're flying with or to yourself, and then hanging on to that until you go, all right, I can't land there anymore. So my next option is X, Y, or Z, and have two options in your hand and have a changeover point. Like flying over a canyon, sometimes you need to pick what's on the canyon behind you as you're going to the middle of the canyon, and then what's on the other side of the canyon the other way. To go, all right, and then my no-go point on the canyon, I'm going to go ahead and declare it. Kind of like we hopefully habitually try to do, let's say, takeoff briefing and have all their contingencies. I think briefing as you're flying along, especially in uninhabited terrain, what your diverts are and saying them out loud is a habit to pick up.
Fernando, you did it was a direct to flight that you did that day. I'm just curious, mentioning about landing spots. I noticed on the one visual you provided, there was 3 or 4 airports that were just north of that of your route. I shouldn't say just north. I know sometimes myself that I'll choose waypoints along airports depending on what type of terrain, more or less, just to give myself more options. Was that something in consideration as part of your pre-takeoff briefing?
It wasn't that day, but guess what is in my pre-flight planning now? And in fact, when we were flying home, I was with the second pilot I was flying with, and she's from Salinas, so California. And I was monitoring every one of those airports as we were passing them by. And we did skirt a little bit north, although our primary consideration flying home was we were dodging a couple of showers on the way home. So, but you can bet I was tracking where all those runways were, and I was calling them out as we were passing them and going, all right, we're this many miles from this one and this many miles from that one. So we'll change over, at X time. And then we tried to keep track of those. And we lost track often, but we did our best. And she was thankful. She said, I never had that in my habit pattern, but it's going to be there now. So yeah, that's a suggestion for everybody.
All right, last couple of questions, man. I appreciate your time here. Is just how long did it take for it to sort of mentally sink in what you just had experienced that day or survived. And then, I don't know, you may have said it and I apologize if I missed it, but how soon were you back in the cockpit?
It's still sinking in, but no. I'll tell you what, and that's why I spent some time on. I appreciate y'all like being patient and bearing with me. But when Tom brought up his, I know Tom's got some feelings in his, and I'm sure there's in this diverse of a group, there's other folks who've had off-airport landings, but I've read about it before and got to personally experience the mental health aspect of when you had an emergency and you got through it. And then you start debriefing yourself to every little mistake. And with my previous life flying fighters, that's what we did. And we did it every day in order to be better. And that's, hopefully you guys can take a little bit of comfort that that's how your military trains. But I do it in GA, and it's kind of I get told to lay off a little bit because I'm always debriefing to all of my mistakes in my brain. And then I try to temper it back to maybe like 3 lessons for the average GA pilot because that's about what they want to hear. So yeah, there was a good 3 months of just this swirling in my brain all the time. And I finally just had to tell myself what I told Tom a little while ago, and for all of y'all, like if you had a successful outcome, you did enough things right to offset anything you might have done wrong and end up with a successful outcome. You did not run out of Swiss cheese. And that's the goal of our risk management concepts and procedures. And we're not going to recite the whole book, but you just have to have a mindset and a habit to be reviewing those kinds of things. And then you have the best chance of having a successful outcome when a contingency happens. How long did it take me to get an airplane? Oof. I wasn't scared to get back in an airplane, but I didn't fly for a while, mainly because I was busy with work. So I don't remember. I'm going to say, I don't know, 2, 3 months. And that's mainly just because I was busy.
Fernando, if I may, a suggestion to all pilots. Once you take off, you're in the air at 5 minutes after the hour. Turn your radio to 120.15, hit the ELT switch for about 4, 5, 6 bursts until you hear it in your earphones, and then turn it back on to the standby position. Don't shut it off completely. This is one way of making sure that your battery is okay for that particular flight, and do it in every flight that you have. But only 5 minutes after the hour and cut it off.
That's a great suggestion.
I'm not sure that's true with the newer ELTs. I think if it's left on for more than a certain number of seconds, they're going to get notified unless you advise them in advance.
I wouldn't want to discourage that practice, but frankly, what we have learned in our lessons when we teach at the camps, they're mentioning that one, they're not really paying attention to 121.5, and two, because of that, like there's so many false alarms that they just kind of don't pay attention to them so much until there's a action that requires them to look for and act on that. However, there is still Civil Air Patrol and folks in Survival Recovery Center that are dedicated to verifying any activations that are out there that somebody reports. There's also, by the way, a really important team that has been built, and they're basically a digital information forensics team. I hinted at it a little bit. I went over it really quick, but literally they have experts on getting satellite data, air traffic control, recording data. They get it immediately when there's an incident that's been reported. And they can start right away with doing some forensics. And oftentimes the verification step happens by that team because they can go, oh, they dropped off of their traffic control feed, but we've picked up their ADSB or we've picked up some other thing, or they can do, flight aware tail number search, and then they are able to verify pretty quickly that the airplane actually landed somewhere. So that's an important thing that's been added to search and rescue process that's out there. So that team is pretty valuable, and it works both ways to either verify a location, negate a bunch of false reports, and then sometimes, like I said, they might be able to confidently assess, and they don't take this lightly, that this is probably a recovery operation, not a search. And then Search and Recovery Center will allocate the appropriate resources when that happens.
It's actually a civil air patrol team that does that, the forensic analysis team.
Oh,
As long
awesome.
as your airplane has a DSP, they can be able to track you.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Fernando, I apologize if you already answered this or spoke, but did you open the doors and lock them? And did you have time to go through the emergency checklist?
No, I made that note. So yeah, it's a great to just bring it back up. Did not do a force landing checklist. So the two things that I'm super thankful for is A, no fire, and B, no fire, and we didn't get jammed with our doors because that would have been a pretty fire is one of the things that scares me the most about a contingency if I'm flying. Um, and having that happen on the ground, like that's one of the things I beat myself up for quite a while was really, really should have done that prior to landing. And I should have been the one really directing Joe and as a crew, as the CFI, I take personal responsibility that I didn't have us do a couple of those steps that really, really, I would say are essential to any forced landing, which is shutting off the fuel and propping that door. Oh, by the way, sorry, as I tag along, there is one more other cool thing you can do. Um, as a suggestion during our survival lecture, we tell people if you can and you've got a moment, this is a seriously baller move because you're flying an airplane and you're trying to have a successful outcome. But if you can get your phone and you can dial 911, that's a very valuable tool to was it Victor? The point that Victor just made. The forensic team often can find that ping from your phone and a last known location well after when you have dropped from radio coverage from air traffic control. So that's an important other step that you can do and add it to your forced landing checklist is if you can just hit 911 on your phone. Nowadays, at least on the iPhone, you can hit the power button and I think the top volume button and it'll go to 911 and then all you got to do is swipe it to have it call. No matter what, if anybody answers or doesn't answer, there should be a ping that goes out there and that can help you out for survival.
And if you look at the FAR aim, or at least the aim, they actually ask us not to do airborne test. It literally says they're not authorized. We're supposed to do them on the ground and actually make sure that we're actually coordinating with the tower next to us. So just to be clear about that.
Yeah. John asked a good question way or a long time ago. Who gets to decide the PAC in an emergency? As CFIs, I think we're responsible. And in fact, we are by definition the PIC, right? We're just allowing the person to act as PIC. So yeah, in our case, I just looked at him and he was flying great and I was monitoring that. And he was so stable that I didn't even question it. I just went right to coordinating because I knew that that was an essential part of a recovery effort if we're successful at landing. So it's a good question, John.
Well, when you're a CFI, is the pilot acting or logging PIC? Because you said you're allowing them to act as. I think you act as the entire flight, and the other person may log. Isn't that the way it works?
Yeah, because they're actually, accomplishing the actions of PIC when they're flying it, right? So we're getting into the semantics of it, but yes, to what you said, and that's my point. Like by definition, we're the higher rated pilot in the airplane. So normally we're PIC by default, but we allow them to act as PIC and manipulate the controls.
And that's how the FAA looks at it as well. The most
Yep.
senior pilot on that flight deck is the one who takes responsibility.
Yep. So that's a good question for John or by John. I don't even know if he's still here. Hope you'll see the recording.
Fernando.
One thing I like about the way you handle the emergency is, I think maybe this goes to your military experience and training, which is, to conquer and divide. Somebody's in charge, but you need them to do certain tasks. It takes the the saturation away from you and accomplishing something else, right? I think if you would have just taken the controls and try to do everything right, you would have lost that huge asset next to you, which has a human brain that can make decisions that have some experience around it as well, right? So, I really think that that's actually something that you probably don't take enough credit for. Somebody else needs to point out, but that you basically were willing to give up some tasks to accomplish other tasks, knowing that you had only a limited amount of time. And I think that can be accomplished with a student pilot as well. Don't take away from people that are in the airplane that their experience outrules them from helping out in the situation. I think you're basically able to say, look, you got the airplane under control. I'm going to do these things, And I think that's something that we could really key on there.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, and that's why I mentioned it the way I did. Like, I know that there's CFIs out there who were like, if there's an emergency, I've got it. I'm taking over. And that's why I spent a little bit of time on the experience that we had over the weekend. Like, we were building trust with each other for a whole weekend. Him in my direction to him on how to fly through canyons and do the things we did. We learned canyon turns. We learned, we flew at a small little, really small paved strip that's in a canyon and did things like that, right? So we had built up a good amount of rapport, and I think it just things happen for a reason. We had the trust to just fly it without having to have a big discussion about it. Who's PIC? Are you PIC? I'm PIC, or you've got the controls. No, I got the controls. Kind of stuff. We just naturally just coordinated and basically how we were flying all weekend long. Obviously, sometimes you do a cross country and it's like you pair up with somebody for that cross country. In that case, to your point, Phil, I hope it's okay to call you Phil, but
Yeah, this kind of goes to fundamentals, right? Like it's
yeah,
like eventually when you solo somebody, you're willing to sit in the airplane and let them
yeah,
have the controls, right? It doesn't matter how bad the landing is, you're going to let them, and then you start kind of develop. I mean, this is the CFI intimacy between them and
yep.
a student or whoever they're at. Like, there's measures that go on here, right? Like
Funny
you
enough,
can't. There's a
some
subjective measure that's not. It's very hard to explain, right? It's you
as
knew
an
he was
example,
fine.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
and
you're
as an
fine.
example, like sometimes you're flying with a good IFR rated pilot or commercial rated pilot, and again, by default, usually the most experience ends up being the PIC. One of the worst situations is two CFIs. And then who's taking control at that point? And then you start measuring who's got the most experience and those kind of things at a time when you're trying to handle an emergency. So that's kind of bad. So doing stuff like I know some CFIs will do, I'm PIC on this leg, and then you'll be PIC on the next leg, and they just establish that. However, you can also say in an emergency, blah blah blah. Here's what I expect. So having that kind of a crew coordination brief, it's what the commercial operations do. So it's one of the things that I know Jason Miller does, and I know Mike Shiflett and him used to teach and fly together. As a safety measure to make GA better, and start to try to approach commercial flying, doing those kind of SOPs and habit patterns is probably something we can all take in our own flying. I want to point out Dylan McCarthy at 10:02 found the auction and salvage document. So if you want to find that link, or I guess I can copy it and post it here recent. Let me post it here now. It's pretty cool. So you actually get to see the airplane. Unfortunately, it's not as good condition as we left it, but
Fernando, can you please elaborate on that 4 fingers, 5 fingers method that you mentioned earlier?
it's a colloquialism, so it's not official. And somebody pointed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not 1, 2, 3.45 is not one of the AIM appointed air-to-air coordination frequencies. There are some in the AIM, and I'm not going to remember the page right now, but there are some designated. So you can find those and then use those whenever you want to do formation flight or find your friend, and get them on a common frequency. So as a camp of 16 people, we kind of needed something that we can coordinate with. That frequency, for instance, on the camp this last weekend was very busy with other people also trying to do that. There was some folks in a commercial, some kind of 121 operation, I'm sorry, 135 operation, and they were talking about like their GPS devices in their airplane and what their maintenance status was, and just having a long diatribe on the radio. So that was annoying. An option there is to then switch a common one that's used. I'm not subscribing to it or saying you should, is they call it 4 fingers, which is 1, 2, 3.4. So it's similar, and they're just two frequencies that are typically open and able to do air-to-air coordination. But again, it's just like use your POH. I would say go to the AIM, and as CFIs especially, we should probably at least have the numbers that are prescribed as air-to-air coordination somewhere in our hip pocket before we're going to use them.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hey, I'm curious. I used to have to do a lot of accident investigations on human factors. When was it from the time that you lost your engine and you knew you're going to have to go off field did you really know it was okay? Were you out of the plane? Were you taking a breath? Did you have landing assured? When did you know, okay, this isn't going to be super bad?
When we stopped. And even then, like there was smoke and dust and dirt and stuff like that. But there's probably a moment there where we probably were I mean, we were at risk the whole time we're flying over the rocks. But again, in hindsight, and this is 100% hindsight. I know at the time I wasn't thinking about aim point airspeed. I was just thinking he's flying best glide and I'm happy and I'm doing coordination to get us rescued when we land. And so that crew resource management, I think, thankfully was working in our favor. That's why I mentioned the energy, right? I wasn't thinking about the energy in our flight. It was just singular, fly best glide, and that's maximizes your chance of getting as far as you can into a crash, with old Bob Hoover saying. When we were bouncing along, we didn't do the forced landing procedures. We didn't touch the brakes until like we hit a rock with the nose tire, which I think is what collapsed the strut and flattened our nose tire. And then it dug in, and then we just kind of went, ugh. But electrical was on, the fuel switch was on. Like we probably were at a pretty good risk as soon as we stopped until we finally like did those, like got our brains together and did a couple of steps there, and then got ourselves out of the airplane.
I was involved in one back in the 96, where I was flying and I heard a mayday. This is in the Sacramento area. Turned out to be a student pilot in a 150 who did run it out of gas on a cross country because he didn't want to have to pay money for it out of the club. It was right after a big rainstorm, which I knew about and he hadn't figured. And I was flying over and I heard the mayday. And the kid didn't realize where he was going to try and put the plane down in what we call the YOLO bypass, which is basically a flood zone, that the first point of contact was going to flip him over. And that's what I was thinking about when you were saying I'm one rock away basically from flipping over. This could change dramatically.
That's really dumbass.
Does YOLO stand for you only live once?
What's that?
Does YOLO River stand for you only live once?
It almost did. But ironically, I took out a SAC exec, so I knew the winds. I knew it favored this berm that he could have landed it on. He didn't want to do that. He was just going to put it down. So air traffic control said, if you can do it, I talked him down to a safe landing. He only flipped it once. They figured we got him down to 38 knots when he finally had his gear touch down. He got out, and I actually thought he was injured. I'm also a medic. And I think, damn, am I going to have to land on that berm, screw up my prop on my personal plane to go over there and give him aid? And he collapsed, and he said he was kissing the ground that he was alive. But it was so hard talking him into, I'm looking at literally something a quarter mile from you. You could land safely on a hard, long, 2-mile long surface. But he wouldn't do it because his CFI said, off-field landing, just put it down in a field. And he didn't realize that was a muddy field that probably could have killed him. He was super, super lucky. But yeah, it's tough talking people into doing what they should be doing because they're so tunnel visioned on maybe one of the things that their CFI told them or something like that. But the kid made it. Later, I called the Aero Club when I got the N number to say, hey, how's he doing? Because he never got back with me. They said, if you hear from him, please have him call the Aero Club after he totaled their airplane.
Yeah. Victor answered the question about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Knowing what it says about using the frequency, I will just say, like, when you're in the middle of backcountry Idaho or, Canyonlands, Utah, do what your certificate and your professionalism will allow. But yeah, then somebody posted a link. I think it was Mark. So that's great. Appreciate you, Michael.
I have a question. So, like the 182 has a constant speed propeller, and something that I don't know. The last couple of years, I thought quite a bit about because you start realizing. Did you guys pull the prop back out of curiosity, or that's a lot to think about? But like, did you guys ever think about pulling the prop back to get a better glide or anything like that?
Nope.
Yep. Yeah. See, I don't think people think
We were
about that
milking
stuff.
that is a technique that I think you should have in your emergency checklist. And it could be
Yeah.
significant if you're not making your runway. And that's one of the things back to aim point. Like
Yeah.
subconsciously, I can tell you that what we did assess, and I knew what we were doing was this mesa was not drifting away from us in the canopy, and it wasn't drifting towards us in the canopy, which meant we would have to maneuver and maybe S-turn because we're going to overfly it, right? So that same aim point analysis, but that's not what I was thinking. I was just thinking we're going to make the mesa. We need to make the mesa. I hope we make the mesa. I mean, we're going alternating through those thoughts. But the reality was we didn't have to choose another landing plan because this plan was continuing to work all the way down. And that's where I cite the little bit of excess energy. The best thing to do, or a technique as the PIC that is recommended, is to minimize your drag by going to a finer pitch on your prop. Or if you have to, maybe even shutting it down if it's partial power and it's actually causing more drag than you want. That's another part that goes to, we had excess energy going into the Mesa because we actually had more drag than we should have or wanted. For those of you guys that do multi-engine, you know that there's a zero drag uh, power setting and manifold pressure setting and prop setting, excuse me, combination. So those kinds of things are there and their considerations. So I would absolutely recommend practicing to the point where you're practicing with your constant speed prop and what you would do with it. And then that way you're prepared for it, as opposed to not thinking about it like we did.
It's an interesting thought, right? Like the human factor is like I think that you'll probably understand this too. The more you're CFI, the longer you do this, the human factor starts becoming bigger and bigger, right? Like, how do we teach things that people will remember in these moments, right? Because you could have 5,000 hours and forget crucial things, like shutting down the fuel, right? Like, am I surprised that you guys forgot to shut down the fuel? No, because when things get like this, right? It's very,
Yeah.
very hard. I don't care what people say. It is very, very, very hard even to train for this in such a way that you do all the right things, right? Your focus starts diverting to the things that you in that moment in time find important, not really what it is. It's either the money back quarterback or in hindsight. I remember at the beginning of your talk, you talked about 10,500, and I was thinking, I love altitude. Always get altitude over these
Yeah.
things because it provides options, right? But not everybody teaches it that way, right?
Yeah.
So there's some opinions here, right? That I really like that.
Yeah, and I'll point back out, right, to primacy and recency. In private pilot training, we're always going to train these emergency landings. A lot of people use the ABC method, but whatever your method is. But after you teach it, like hammering it home, like knowing that you're going to do this in a stressful situation. So doing it and saying, hey, we haven't practiced this in 4 weeks, and every 4 weeks, make sure you practice it. Like doing some habit pattern that keeps it within the law of recency in your brain and your student's brain when you're going. A couple great points that were out there. I mentioned them really quickly, but again, it's part of a big story. We didn't have oil, so I didn't think about it. That's my mistake. In hindsight, it wouldn't have done anything anyway, because more than likely there would have been oil for the prop to change pitch. And Michael, thanks for the point. That is what I was getting at, and you illustrated it or worded it really well on how important that is if drag is not your friend for a situation. Victor, no, we didn't squawk 7,700 because we immediately got flight following and they gave us a squawk as soon as I declared emergency. That came immediately out of his mouth. I think he was prepared because they heard partial radio calls from us. So I think they had a squawk handy because it was his immediate response was to give us a squawk and to get into our emergency coordination.
Is there any controllers in the room by chance? One thing I always want to ask a controller: if you squawk 7,700, does it actually give them a notification on their screen? Does it come out to them like in a way where they see you right away? Because part of my thought process is 7,700 and an ident. They'll start looking for you with ADSB typically, is what I was wondering.
What I remember, and somebody correct me, is, and I've done a couple of tours, plus, I work as a contractor at Nellis Air Force Base for the next month, and then I go full-time Husky. But that I'm pretty sure what it does is it flashes and it highlights kind of, for a digital screen, a monocolor digital screen, but it highlights itself as like a bold and a flashing, or at least a bright return. Somebody correct me if that's not correct.
The other
That's what
thing that 7700 will do is it'll break through multiple sectors. If the sectors are filtered, stacked vertically,
cool.
7700 will appear on multiple controllers' screens, even if it's not their sector for altitude.
I know it highlights itself, so don't quote me on how it does, but that's what I remember from having a couple of tours and being able to be in there. And I've worked there because of my coordination with the Nellis ranges anyway.
Brian Lloyd here. I wanted to make a comment. One of the things that I actively teach my students, I do a lot of transition training with Moonies as well as other aircraft. And I actively teach high key, low key power off emergency approach to a field. And that handles the energy problem because it gives you several points at which you can gauge your energy state on down so that you end up hitting your target touchdown point with the correct energy to land. So I know it's even listed in the POH for my airplane, and that's one of the things I teach. But unfortunately, it doesn't show up in a lot of areas. And yet it's something that nearly every military pilot, certainly the ones I know and have flown with, are familiar with. And there's no reason why we don't use and teach that in the civil area as well.
Yeah. That's great. And I think it goes back to like having many tools in your toolbox. I've gotten the question a number of times, and in fact, the Garmin Rapid Oshkosh, I was talking to him about this, and he got excited. He's like, oh, "Did you use the glide rings?" And to be honest, that's one example of knowing your equipment. I'm like, in the situation we had, glide rings were useless. Now, what they do are great for is kind of make an airfield that's nearby because that symbol is up on your map. You can see if there's a highway underneath you that you might not have been looking for, or if you're in the weather, kind of stuff. But if you're just looking at terrain, and that's all we had available to us, it's not, unless you have the imagery up, the aerial view, if you will, for the filter or the layer. The glide rings don't do anything for you in that specific situation. I did pay a lot of attention to it this weekend. And yeah, I found it a little bit useful at times when we were gauging, like, do I think I can make that road, or should I try to make the next road? Those kind of things were available. So anyway, that's a pitch to trying to use it and practice with it, and then deciding when it's good for you, when it's not, so you're not wasting your time trying to get a digital thing to help you with when you're flying, when you should be flying the airplane.
Brian Lloyd again. During my circumnavigation a couple of years back, I had an engine failure over the Pacific, and the glide ring was extremely helpful in allowing me to make my decision as to what I was going to have to plan for. Was I going to go swimming, or was I going to be able to make land? So that was a useful decision-making tool. Also, was I going to be able to arrive, once I determined I was going to be able to arrive over land and over an airport, was I going to arrive at kind of what altitude so I could plan for how I was going to make my approach to the airport. Fortunately, I was able to get partial power back from the engine and I was able to make a normal landing back at my departure point. But it was an active tool in my decision-making process and troubleshooting process and planning process for that situation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, circumnavigation. We should have a story for one of these boot camps with your story.
Happy to help if you give me a holler.
Fernando, this is Andrew Whittle. I'd just like to thank you very much. Amazing presentation today. One thing I've noticed with quite a few students at all levels coming through is that we all talk about best glide speed, but everyone forgets the small print that this is for still air. And sometimes, to answer Deb's question from earlier, with what do you mean by excess energy? Well, one way of killing excess energy is to go to a speed other than best glide, i.e. Something considerably slower. Pull the nose up, reduce the speed by maybe 20, 30 knots, and then put the nose back down to glide speed. You can lose a fair bit of range straight off that might be helpful if you are too close into a good landing spot. I always try to teach people to use the best glide speed for the wind, but also that sometimes you might not want the best glide speed. You might want something different. It's just another option that's available to you if you have excess energy.
Yeah. I mean, when you get in the situation, you fly that airplane and put it where you want it. Don't let it fly you.
It fits in really nicely with the high key, low key way of flying the approach.
Yep.
I was just going to say that.
Andrew brings up a very good point, because if you look at gliders have two speeds. They have best glide and they have minimum sink. One gives you good distance, one keeps you in the air longer. So you choose which speed you need based on what you want to achieve.
The other thing I think people forget is that drag increases more slowly on the fast side of best glide. And so if you're facing a headwind, going a little faster than best glide will actually produce a better result. And I do teach that as well. Anything up to 10% above glide speed is effectively glide speed. And therefore you can improve your ground speed and range in that situation.
That's awesome. But to the point where you're talking about it, chair flying, practice this. Think about those actions when you're practicing an emergency landing.
And then go up and practice it in the air.
Yep.
And then go up and practice it.
In order to have that recency. And if you can, do it out in an unpopulated area all the way down to, basically a low approach. If you can. Obviously that's difficult in the populated areas, but that's one of the things we were doing on our adventure camp is we were finding dirt strips. And even if it was a rental and you couldn't land it on the dirt strip, you could always practice slow approaches and practicing the how do I get to the high key or what, and flying it and finding out that you screwed it up and then how do I fix it, because gravity's always going to win. Those kinds of things, like making those decisions 100% helps it be added to your primacy and hopefully your recency, because you've been practicing on a regular basis. And then take these advanced concepts like what Brian just brought up and some of the other folks have been bringing up, and bring those advanced concepts into you so you don't forget to do something like pull the prop if you're able to. Awesome. I love these discussions, so I'm available if anybody wants to, and I'll make sure Nick has my contact information to put on the newsletter. Please let me know.
Boot Camp in Miami Beach, Florida. This is the Power Hour. Welcome.